Have you ever considered that the very thing keeping a narcissist in control of your life might be something you're doing without realizing it? Not because you're weak, not because you're foolish, but because you've spent years believing that when someone hurts you, the solution is to explain yourself better, defend your intentions, or work harder to make them understand your perspective. Unfortunately, that instinct often becomes the trap. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future discussions. Today, we're talking about one behavior that can completely disrupt a narcissist's usual pattern, and surprisingly, it isn't confrontation. It isn't exposing them or proving them wrong. It isn't even leaving the relationship. It's something far quieter. It's remaining calm. That sounds almost too simple to matter. Most people hear that advice and dismiss it immediately, but the psychological impact of calmness is far more powerful than people realize. Once you understand why it works, you'll start seeing narcissistic behavior in a completely different way. Many people assume narcissists thrive on being cruel, but the truth is more complicated. Their behavior is often fueled by something else entirely. They depend on emotional reactions. Whether it's anger, panic, frustration, or sadness, those responses become the fuel that keeps the cycle moving. And without realizing it, many people continue feeding that cycle every single day. To understand why calmness is so powerful, you first need to understand what is really happening beneath narcissistic behavior. Most of the time, the issue is not the specific argument you're having. It is not about who is right or wrong. The real goal is often the emotional reaction that follows. Think about how these situations usually unfold. A narcissist makes an accusation, twists a conversation, brings up an old mistake, or suddenly withdraws affection through silence. On the surface, it may look like random behavior, but there is usually a pattern. Each action creates emotional pressure designed to pull you into a response. When you become anxious, they gain reassurance that they still affect you. When you become angry, they suddenly have a new argument to focus on. When you become upset and try to defend yourself, they receive even more attention and emotional energy. Every reaction keeps the interaction alive. Psychologists often refer to this dynamic as narcissistic supply. It is the emotional attention that helps a person with strong narcissistic traits feel significant, important, or in control. The attention does not have to be positive. Negative emotions can serve the same purpose. What makes this confusing is that many narcissists are not consciously planning every move. These patterns often develop over many years and become automatic. They react the way they always have because it has worked for them repeatedly. That is why logical explanations rarely solve the problem. You believe you're having a discussion based on facts and reason. In reality, you're often dealing with a deeply ingrained emotional pattern that operates long before logic ever enters the conversation. Now the question becomes simple. What happens when you stop giving that pattern what it wants? Imagine a situation where a narcissist says something designed to upset you. Maybe they accuse you of being selfish. Maybe they rewrite a past event to make you look like the problem. Normally, you would feel the urge to defend yourself immediately. You would explain what really happened and try to correct the story, but this time you don't. Instead, you answer in a calm and steady voice. You keep your emotions under control. You acknowledge what was said without getting pulled into a debate. Maybe you simply respond, "I understand that's how you see it," and leave it there. What happens next often surprises people. Rather than calming down, the narcissist usually becomes more intense. They repeat their point. They speak louder. They search for new ways to provoke you. Sometimes they bring up mistakes from years ago. Sometimes they say something intentionally hurtful. This reaction occurs because the usual process has been interrupted. The emotional response they expect is not arriving. The system is no longer working the way it normally does. For many people, this escalation feels like proof that staying calm is failing. In reality, it often means the opposite. The behavior is becoming stronger because it is no longer producing the result it was designed to create. This is the stage where most people give up. The pressure becomes uncomfortable, and they return to arguing, explaining, or defending themselves. But if you remain steady through that difficult moment, something important begins to happen. The cycle starts losing its momentum, and for the first time, the dynamic begins to shift. If you can stay grounded through that period of escalation, you will eventually notice something that most people never expect. The intensity starts to fade, not because the narcissist suddenly understands your perspective, not because they admit they were wrong, and certainly not because the conflict has been resolved. The energy simply begins to run out. Without an emotional reaction to fuel the situation, there is nothing left for the argument to feed on. The accusations become weaker. The attempts to provoke you lose their impact. Eventually, the conversation often ends without the dramatic conclusion they were pushing toward. This is one reason therapists frequently recommend a technique known as gray rocking. The concept is simple but powerful. You become as emotionally uninteresting as a gray rock whenever someone is trying to draw you into unnecessary conflict. Many people misunderstand this approach. Gray rocking does not mean becoming cold, rude, or emotionally detached from everyone around you. It does not mean pretending you have no feelings. It simply means refusing to provide emotional drama when someone is actively trying to provoke it. You stop arguing over every accusation. You stop chasing approval. You stop desperately trying to prove your innocence. Instead, your responses become brief, calm, and predictable. At first, this can feel unnatural. You may feel as though you are letting false accusations go unanswered. You may even worry that your silence makes you look weak. But the truth is that strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is the ability to remain composed when someone is doing everything they can to pull you off balance. The less emotional energy you provide, the fewer opportunities they have to keep the cycle alive. And that changes far more than most people realize. What many people never talk about is that the hardest part of this process isn't staying calm during the conversation. The real challenge often begins after it's over. You walk away feeling composed on the outside, but inside, your mind starts questioning everything. A small voice appears and asks whether you were too distant. Maybe you should have explained yourself more clearly. Maybe one more conversation would have finally helped them understand. Maybe you were being unfair by refusing to engage. That inner conflict is incredibly common. After spending months or even years dealing with someone else's emotional volatility, you can become conditioned to believe that keeping the peace is your responsibility. You start feeling accountable for their reactions, their moods, and their disappointments. Over time, you learn to place their emotional comfort above your own well-being. That is why calmness can feel uncomfortable at first. It may even feel cruel, despite the fact that it is one of the healthiest choices you can make. The deeper lesson here is not simply learning how to gray rock. It is learning that you are not responsible for managing another adult's emotions. You are not required to sacrifice your peace to prevent someone else's discomfort. And remaining calm does not make you cold, uncaring, or heartless. Each time you hold your ground without losing yourself, something important changes, not necessarily in the narcissist, but in you. You become clearer, stronger, more confident in your own reality, and those small moments eventually add up. That is the real victory, not changing them, not winning the argument, not getting the apology you've been waiting for. The real victory is reclaiming yourself. If you've ever tried the gray rock approach, share your experience in the comments. Did it help, or did the person push back even harder? I'd love to hear your story. And if you found this discussion helpful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. See you next time.